Goo!
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy is a rated PG-13 action, adventure, and comedy. They didn't put sci-fi in there. I added it. It's got a runtime of 121 minutes, just over 2 hours. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's 92% from the critics, 92% from the audience. That places it 6th in the MCU amongst the critics, behind only Black Panther, Endgame, Iron Man, Ragnarok, No Way Home, and it's tied with Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Those are all great movies. I personally would toss it right at the top. I think it is the most complete out of all these movies, but there's a bunch of very good MCU movies.
Yep, and the audience score places it 5th behind No Way Home, Shang-Chi, Far From Home, and Wakanda Forever. That is a much more questionable list.
I'm not going to agree with that one.
Yeah. On Metacritic, this has a 76, which is the 4th highest in the MCU, behind Black Panther, Iron Man, and Endgame, which I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
Dude, this movie is written by James Gunn, who prior to this was known for writing the 2 Scooby-Doo movies. He also wrote Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yeah.
And then he did this little sort of, it's sort of a cult classic of a movie, or it was until Gunn got big. Super, which was the Rainn Wilson and what's his name? Elliot Page movie from 2010. So prior to Guardians of the Galaxy, he really wasn't known for anything directing wise anyway. It's just what he wrote. Upcoming Goo, what he's writing. This is in post-production. Coyote vs. Acme, which I think comes out this year. He's of course doing that Superman Legacy movie. He's also directing that. And he will be writing the Creature Commando show. And he's also writing a Starsky and Hutch television show, Goo.
Oh. I don't know if I want that. No, I'm all set with that. I will say that this one feels like he's a little more reined in. You know, it's a little more focused, and it's not as slapsticky or as schlocky as some of the other movies.
Well, to me, like, I felt like he didn't earn it yet, you know, and then after this movie,
no, this one did so well that for 2, they're like, you can be more like you, and then it gets a little more off the rails.
Sure. Also a writing credit on this movie, Goo, Nicole Perlman, who had nothing at all on her IMDb prior to this, since she has done Captain Marvel and Detective Pikachu. So she's still kind of new on the scene and has a decent little resume. Of course, this is directed by Gunn, who had just done Super. And the only thing he's got coming up that he's actually committed to directing, Goo, because again, now James Gunn has become the head of the DC movie world. He's just committed to doing that Superman movie. And I wonder how often he's going to step in and direct a movie. Yeah,
it's important. That one's important. Yes.
Sure is. Synopsis, Goo. I scrolled too much. A group of intergalactic criminals must pull together to stop a fanatical warrior with plans to purge the universe. Now,
kind of underselling it, but sure.
Yeah, it's succinct. You know, they don't tell you too much on that. This movie stars Chris Pratt as Peter Quill / Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Dave Bautista as Drax, Vin Diesel as the voice of Groot, and Bradley Cooper as the voice of Rocket.
So let's cut it right there. Those 5, perfect casting.
Yeah, absolutely dynamite. And as far as Pratt and Dave Bautista go, the expectations were sort of low because we had never seen either one in something like that. Of course, in this same year, Pratt had the Lego movie, so he was on his way to becoming a star, but we hadn't seen Chris Pratt leading man yet.
Well, Jurassic World, did that come out before or after this?
I think it was 15. It might be 13.
You are correct. Right. No, it was. No, that might have been 15, actually. Either way, even if it was just before, this was the star-making movie.
Yeah, this is Chris Pratt as Han Solo, and it worked out well. Some other notable roles here. It's a little bit long of the cameo list. Lee Pace plays the villain Ronan. He's fine as a bland villain.
Exactly. He isn't. I mean, he is maybe the worst thing in the movie, but he's not terrible.
Yep. Michael Rooker as Yondu Udanta, who has obviously a much larger role in the second movie, but I think he does a good enough job establishing that character in this movie.
Yeah, upon further rewatch every single time with this, you do feel more of the father-son stuff between him and Peter.
Yeah, so you pick up on the underlying connections for sure. Karen Gillan, another great casting as Nebula.
Yeah, and she has gotten better with every movie.
She definitely has, and they've been using her more as well. Jaimin Hansu as Korath, who pops up a couple times.
Fine, yeah.
John C. Reilly as Corpseman Day, who you thought was going to play a larger role going forward, as well as Glenn Close actually
yes.
as Nova Prime, and they just haven't.
I guess my biggest issue with the casting of him here is they can't use him elsewhere.
Yes, that's true. He's locked in as Corpseman Day.
Yeah.
Dude, Benicio del Toro's in this movie as the Collector for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. He's fucking awesome.
He's great. I wish that they gave us a scene of him and Goldblum at some point in these movies, or like not a show on Disney Plus, but like maybe a half an hour thing of them just going back and forth. Also, he might have done the best job with his voiceover work in the What If show. The show stinks, but he did so good in that episode.
For sure. We also had Laura Haddock as Meredith Quill, Peter's mother. Sean Gunn as Kraglin, and more importantly, Goo, he was the on-set Rocket Raccoon, and they used him for some of the mocap for Rocket, which is an unsung hero.
The CGI in this movie, for them to get us to care about a raccoon, an anthropomorphic raccoon that looks perfect.
Nice word.
I know. I've been thinking of it all day because I didn't want to stumble over it. It's a really tough word to say, but credit to them.
Yeah. Peter Serafinowicz. Serafinowicz?
I feel like you should have just stopped after the first one. I think you close enough.
He's like the leader of the Nova Corps guys, Denarian Saul.
Yeah.
Christopher Fairbank plays the broker. And then Goose, Stan Lee, his cameo in this as the Xanadarian ladies man.
I want to say that when I did a Goose Juicy 6-pack of Stan Lee cameos, this was definitely top 3.
Yeah, he's they show him like prominently, and it's a well-lit thing. It's nice. Goo, I'm going to talk about how important this movie is. And I think, we have talked about this movie a ton, but I feel like in general, people don't understand how important this movie was for the MCU and getting it home and for the Infinity Saga. This was the MCU's 10th movie. And although Winter Soldier had come out just 4 months prior, so obviously that was awesome. The 2 right before these 2 were Dark World and Iron Man 3. 2 of the 5 worst MCU movies, and these are the first 4 movies after the Avengers. So it's a real up and down thing. They still haven't really nailed it. And then right after this movie, it was Ultron. So this movie and Winter Soldier, to a certain degree, stands out about how important they were. Like you look at all those factors, and then you also consider it's our first venture out into the galaxy. We hadn't done that yet. And we'd been on Asgard, but we really hadn't played around in space. The Thor movies didn't really get galactic. And then also the final act of the Dark World takes place on Earth. So like even in the second Thor movie, we didn't play with too much space. So not only was this our first foray into the galaxy, it's a whole new bunch of heroes, which we had never seen. And most of us didn't know anything about previously. You, of course, had a little bit more knowledge about Guardians, but the general fan just knew the regular Avengers. And we were still just dealing with the Avengers at this point, even in Winter Soldier, slowly building up that cast, adding Falcon, adding people here and there, and diving a little bit further into villains like Winter Soldier. And then, Ultron introduces some new things. But this movie is so different than anything they had done before. And even right after it, it still stuck out. And so I truly think that without the success of this movie, we don't see the amazing culmination of the Infinity Saga. We're dealing directly with 2 daughters of Thanos in this movie. And that story is so central, obviously, to what happens, what culminates in Infinity War and Endgame. So I think you would have to say, if you pulled back and looked at the whole run, this is the most important movie in the MCU, even now.
You also have to look at the fact that after this one came out, and then maybe like 2 or 3 down the line, because after the success of this one, they tried to mimic what this one was.
Right.
For better or for worse. Like, we enjoy Ragnarok, GOTG2, but like those movies happened, and that style of movie making happened because of how good this one was.
Yeah, and the issue is when you don't have James Gunn leading the charge in those movies, they just don't hit at the same rate that this movie does and the other Guardians movies do.
Ragnarok did.
Right, you're right. Ragnarok and Taika do that as well. But I think in part why this movie was so successful, of course, James Gunn knocked it out of the park, and we've now seen, 9 years later, what that's led to for him. For me, having absolutely zero expectations for these characters really, really helped.
Yeah. And upon seeing this one, like I already told you, I think maybe in the news dump last week, this was the one that made me go back. Like, I had seen Iron Man in theaters. I had seen a bunch of a couple of them in theaters or on like home release, and I was into them, but not super into them. After seeing this, I'm like, I'm going to go back and watch these again. And then I was just hooked.
And I think that plays into, like, we're building this Avengers universe, this shared universe. And you're like, all right, I like this. The Avengers experience in theaters was pretty cool, seeing everyone come together. But what was the next step? How are they going to improve upon that? And it was Guardians and playing in this, Infinity Saga with Thanos. And so to what you said, you watch this and you go back, you're like, all right, I'm going to like rewatch these, really get to know these Marvel movies, and then really get excited for what's coming.
They said, do you like Han Solo? Here's 3 of them. Let's go ahead and hop into the gauntlet, Mac, for Guardians of the Galaxy 2014. And the first one up here is fun factor, great music cues, tons of humor that wasn't over the top, because it does get a bit over the top in the next 2 movies. The space action is dope. And I think the scenes where it's just them having dialogue, just simple discussion, I think those are the best scenes. And very specifically, the scene where they are making the plan just before going on to Ronan's ship, I think that might be the best non-action scene in the MCU. I think that everything about it is absolutely nailed with all 5 characters. And this might be my favorite line delivery. If we do a best in series MCU again, this is the best line delivery in the entire MCU.
We didn't have time to work out the minutia of the plan.
The way he says minutia kills me.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper's super good in this. And in that scene you're talking about, and in general in this movie, the way that's it's written and shot, they do such a good hot potato game the whole time. Characters bounce. It's more than just ping pong, because it's more than just 2 characters. It's 4 or 5 in the room at the same time, commenting on each other's comments, conversations. It's so good.
I have a plan.
You've got a plan.
Yes.
First of all, you're copying me from when I said I had a plan.
I'm not. People say that all the time. It's not that unique of a thing to say.
Just amazing. And then this.
What percentage?
I don't know. 12%.
12%?
That's a fake laugh.
It's real.
Totally fake.
That is the most real, authentic, hysterical laugh of my entire life, because that is not a plan.
It's barely a concept.
It's better than 11%.
And like, they open with this emotional thing with Quill's mom, which is great. And then basically the rest of the runtime, because of this game of hot potato amongst the Guardians, the whole thing's fun. The whole runtime's fun.
Now I'm standing. You all happy? We're all standing up now. Bunch of jackasses standing in a circle.
Satisfactor. How satisfied are you by this movie? I think this movie by the end is incredibly satisfying, and it also leaves you with a ton of mystery for the sequels.
Sure. Yeah. I think, when you see them finally come together as one unit, that's really satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like all of the sci-fi stuff we get, especially at the time in the MCU, it's like a breath of fresh air. And I don't think that can be overstated.
I've said this a million times, and I maybe have said this on the podcast a million times. This is my favorite Star Wars movie.
I have a point to make about that later, Goo, but you're right. This is...
Put a pin in that.
If you feel like how I have felt, where Star Wars has left us wanting some stuff, look to the Guardians movies.
Satisfactor. And before you say, wait a second, Goo, didn't you just say that? No, this is SAD.
With a D.
Did it make you cry? And the stuff with the mother, man, just gets me every single time. When they went, at the beginning, it's tough. And then at the end with the Power Stone and her reaching again, I'm not like, bawling my eyes out like with some other stuff, but I'm tearing up.
Yeah, both of us are lucky enough to not have experienced loss on that level at a young age. So we can't speak to that, but I can only imagine how devastating that is. So obviously that's sad. But then, Goo, in the climax of this movie, the "We Are Groot" scene is so good. Yes. It's so good.
I'll tell you what, with all of like the father-son stuff or like the parental stuff in these movies, it hits home more with me now, and I'm just a giant puss.
I wonder, after I watched this, I immediately followed it up with Guardians 2. Have you rewatched it since you're a father?
No.
I wonder if it changes your viewing on it. It even change.
Will I side more with ego?
No. I think you might pick up and appreciate some more themes that they play with.
I doubt it. I don't change. Borometer. And like we said earlier, Ronan might be the most boring thing about this movie, but it's not earth-shattering, like, record-scratching stuff. It's just, hey, I want to Kree.
Yeah, I agree. He's not great, but they also don't spend too much time with him.
This face, too.
Just enough for it to work. Plus, we all know that he's just a pawn for Thanos, so they don't need to spend more time.
Also, like, just destroy the planet. Why are you distracted by a guy dancing? Right?
It's confused.
What are you, stupid?
Oh, yes.
Apparently he is. Actually, Thanos does make the point of saying that. You're a dumb child. Thanos was right.
Hashtag Thanos
was right.
About a lot of things.
Halloween. Has your interest in this movie waned over time? And no, I like it more and more as I watch it.
This movie just puts a smile on my face. You playing those few cuts puts a smile on my face. This movie is just a delight.
I watched it twice yesterday. I watched it once by myself.
Yep.
And then I was like, hey, my wife, do you want to watch it tonight? And she's like, I've only seen it once and I was high. And I'm like, we're going to watch it tonight, but we're going to do it sober because being sober is cool.
When this movie came out, were you guys together?
2014? No.
Wow. That's how long ago this movie came out. It's crazy.
I know.
Wow.
Wow. Aquator. It is better than 2017's Aquaman by a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
Pants Tent City. Excite Bike Mania. What got you going in this movie? Jailbreak. The chase through nowhere. The executed plan. Just some of those action scenes.
Yeah, I had a hard time just picking a scene. To me, there's like 5 or 6 standout things. A small one pretty early on, but I actually fucking loved it then, and I loved it even now upon the rewatch. Thanos talking down to Ronan at that sanctuary is awesome. Josh Brolin's voice is perfect, and it's like haunting. You're like, oh fuck, Thanos is scary. Like you said, the prison break, that was dynamite. I also, this is more on a rewatch than in 2014, but looking for Easter eggs in the collector's room makes that scene so much better. You get Cosmo, Howard, Yondu's arrow scene when he kills like 20 dudes in 2 seconds. That's fucking awesome. And then finally, when they all come together at the end, save Peter, save the Power Stone. That's also great.
Max Credit Union. Who gets credit for this movie? And I want to, once again, credit to the CGI people. It seems like they had enough time to really make everything look good, but very specifically, Rocket Raccoon.
Yes, you can see the emotion on the face of a raccoon, which is impressive. I agree with you there, but I think, of course, Pratt was great, but I've got to give credit to Dave Bautista, who came out of absolutely nowhere to crush this role. Mm-hmm. Prior to this, he had done like a couple episodes of television, just played a big muscly guy a couple times. The resume was razor thin. There was nothing there, nothing like this, especially. And this asked him to do so much. And he crushes the comedy in this, which is undoubtedly the hardest thing to do as an actor.
Also, this is my favorite Drax because this is before he was over the top, slapstick, super silly. And I know that you really like him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Infinity War, and Geotichi 3. But this is my favorite version where he's a little more serious.
Yeah, no, that's true. In 2, though, him and Mantis stuff is awesome as well. But you're right. It's a different Drax than all the other ones in this.
Also, great delivered line at the end where he's like, Peter, I'm going to fight beside you, and then I'll see my wife and daughter.
Yeah,
like, hey, I'm going to die.
Yeah, he's like, I'm good with this. This is a good death, a warrior's death.
What's a good song from this movie that we can sing a hot dog with?
Come and get your hot dogs.
Oh, that was a bad one, but I guess we already rolled with it. Nothing we can do here. Guys, send us your musical lyrics, but with hot dogs from this movie. Any song.
Oh, I got sent to TikTok today. Let me hear your thoughts on this, Q. Someone seasoning their hot dogs before they put them on the grill. Have you seen this? Have you been aware of this?
I've never seen it, but it sounds good.
they poured a little bit of Italian dressing on the dogs and then sprinkled like a bunch of spices on there. I think I got to try it.
By the way, Mac's like a 50-year-old uncle on TikTok. He's just sending me stuff all the time. He's the only person sending me stuff.
Oh, you don't have TikTok combos with people?
No.
I have like specific lanes that I send, you know, depending on the content.
I'm so bad at TikTok. I've kind of given up on it, but I know that I can't. It stinks. Yeah.
This movie is expertly paced. It has great action, great sci-fi, great comedy, an all-time great soundtrack, the introduction of a bunch of awesome characters, and then expands the reach and scope of the MCU in a massive way. And ultimately, upon a rewatch, you truly realize how important this movie was to the Infinity Saga. I think we can honestly thank this movie, and to your point, Norm Macdonald, and a couple other things to the existence of this podcast. It was one of the first movies we ever talked about and like shared love over and was like, oh, we could do this on the podcast. So it also helped our friendship grow. It's just, this movie has a special place to both of us, for both of us. It's easy 40 hot dogs. I have it number 2 in the MCU behind just Infinity War. And if I had to do my all-time list, you know, my top 10, 15, 20, this is in the conversation.
I think this movie effortlessly checks so many of the boxes, or even all of the boxes of what makes a movie fun. And it just feels so fresh, and so fresh to the point that so many comic book movies after this tried to be it. And a lot of them couldn't do it, but this was a trendsetter. The casting is perfect. You laugh throughout the movie, but none of the jokes are over the top. It isn't slapsticky, but there are great one-liners. Character introductions are well-paced. I thought that was done extremely well. It's Peter. Let's take a little time to get to know him. Then let's get to know Gamora. Let's get to know Ronan. Let's get to know Rocket. Let's get to know Groot, so on and so forth. The prison breakout is great. The chase on Nowhere is great. Infiltrating Ronan's ship is all just awesome action. But what makes this movie so good is how they interact with each other and how much they can just go back and forth, like you said, ping pong back and forth, all 5 of the characters. And what kind of sucks is that after this movie, we haven't got a ton of all 5 of them on the screen together at once. I think that's a big formula for this movie and why it's so good. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, my favorite MCU movie, 40 hot dogs.
The only thing I'll say to that, I agree with everything you said, but I also think why this movie, we keep holding it up there, and why maybe they shouldn't go back to, you know, all 5 of them in happy-go-lucky land, is because I don't know if they can replicate it. It sort of seems like a one-time thing.
I think more along this, I just want to see Peter Quill and Rocket Raccoon on the screen together.
Yeah, true.
Those are my 2 favorite characters in the MCU.
So I think that's why you brought it up at the time when we reviewed Guardians Volume 2, the separation of church and state there, of Rocket in one thing. And you also bring this up in Infinity War 2 with the groups. I don't like it because I like mixing around with the new crews, but I do get your point about wanting Peter and Rocket together.
But I did like Rocket with Thor. I will say that.
Because he's Peter-like.
Yes, he's like top 5 MCU character for me too. So
right, exactly.
Oh, hi, it's Goo from the Mac and Goo Movie Club. If you like what you just saw, you can find full episodes of our program on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, CastBox, iHeartRadio, or wherever podcasts are found. And now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.